So welcome back to the Communication Mastery Podcast with me, Mark Burlinson. This is where we unleash the power of understanding to build bridges, not boxes, because communication is the soil in which teamwork grows. We've got a very special episode for you today. My guest in the studio here is Dr. Debbie Connor, who's a great friend, and I'm going to let her explain some of the journey that she's been on because I'm bound to forget some of the stages. But Debbie's a great friend and an asset to the Myrtle Beach community where we're recording this. So Debbie, welcome. Glad to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
And as I said, you and I have known each other for probably 10 years or so, but you've been through quite a journey along the way between Coastal Carolina and Myrtle Beach City Council and a lot of other stuff. Fill us in a little bit of who is Debbie Connor and what does the journey look like?
Oh, gosh. Well, if somebody asked me who is Debbie Connor, I would say a very proud mother, grandmother, and wife.
Right.
That's how I would start that out.
Good.
And then I've also been really lucky to have just an exceptional career. And I started back in 1994 at Coastal Carolina University. So I am in my 30th year there at the university. And I've had various administrative jobs along the way. And while I have worked in administration, I've always also taught courses. Because my first career was in teaching, and I always go back to that. And so during COVID, I had the opportunity to transition over into full-time teaching. So now I teach in the Spadoni College in the PhD program in educational sciences and also in our master's in educational leadership. And I started a new bachelor's program this past year, and it is a Bachelor of Arts in higher education and community engagement, and centers around students who might want to work in the education field, but in a non-traditional sense, so maybe either in higher ed or in the nonprofit organization world. And so I've had a lot of fun creating that program and now teaching my first group of students in that program.
That's fantastic. I love it. And there's so much in the communication space that's wrapped up in what you've just told us. So
a lot.
Give us some of your sort of highlights of what it is you need to inculcate into education majors for them to be able to connect with students. What are some of the keys that you've learned over that long career?
Oh, goodness. So really for any student needing to communicate, you know, whether it's an education student, a master's level student wanting to become a principal of a school, whether it's a PhD student who's looking to move up in administration, or even now my new Bachelor of Arts students who are wanting to lead organizations and educate people in their communities. It is first about listening, understanding what the community needs are, doing either formal or informal assessments of what's happening within the community, and then making sure that they include a collaborative model in their decision making and making sure they're having conversations to move things forward. Right? Leadership is about influence, and influence doesn't happen without the buy-in of the people around you.
Right, yeah. So there's got to be that connection to build the collaboration, hasn't there?
Yes,
I love
yes.
that. And I've seen you over the years be able to connect effectively with a whole range of different people, you know, between faculty who often tend to be on, let's be honest, the older end of the spectrum as the senior faculty, but also to connect very effectively with students, even freshmen who are just walking onto campus. So how do you approach connecting with people who are all different, different ages, different demographics, different cultural backgrounds?
Well, first thing is I love to connect with people who are different than me.
I noticed that. That's why I
really enjoy being around people. It challenges me, right? And so one of the things that I think is most important is I have to give space for people's stories, right? And so whether you are a 18-year-old student, if you are a 45-year-old PhD student, looking to find yourself, whether you, no matter what your background, I enjoy hearing people's stories and understanding where they're coming from, right? And I really enjoy and always have, and one reason why I study organizational behavior and leadership is I really enjoy having people in a group who don't agree.
Right.
That have really different perspectives and actually leading conversations to bring those people in a space of understanding and maybe even some common goals.
Right. So it sounds like you've had some experience of navigating potential conflict whilst helping people to reach more understanding.
Yes.
What are some of the things you've learned trying to do that? Maybe not giving any specific examples if it pushes people under the bus.
Yeah, not giving any specific examples, but, I think that most people in the end have so many commonalities, right? And so it's just finding where those commonalities are and then finding a place. And our current culture is not one that gravitates towards that, right? And so it's helping people maybe collectively come up with goals that are one that can be achieved and of which they can agree upon and put their energy behind, and understanding how to tap people's strengths to be able to achieve those goals. I think when people really do feel like their strengths are being tapped and they can contribute, that there's more buy-in and they want to come to a resolution.
Yes.
And they want to work more collaboratively. Right. I think that people do realize, now there are always some that don't, and that's okay too. I'm totally okay when people are like, I'm out. And I have often found that when those people do check out, they wish they had stayed. Wow. Because good things happen.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. And so too bad for them.
Right. So I'm hearing you say that as you can find people's strengths or people's passions, then their engagement increases.
Right.
And then the whole team benefits from that, or the project, or the whatever it is you're going for to bring people together.
Yes.
And it also sounds like it's sometimes good when a few people don't continue on the journey if they're the ones who are holding things back.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah, right.
It's perfectly.
But I'd say that you're a fairly rare person to be comfortable with all of that in today's culture.
Yeah.
So how do you maintain that attitude? What goes on inside Debbie for you to be able to go, that's okay, and also to draw out the strengths in people?
I think staying focused on the end goal.
Okay, yeah.
Is really important. I think oftentimes we can get so caught up in what's going to happen today.
Right, yeah.
And if you can look past today and see, hey, what's going to happen a year from now? What's going to happen? I mean, it could be 6 months from now or 2 years from now, but not being so fixated on immediate gratification of what's going to happen, but understanding long term, making the investment in the long term, right. And also being focused on what's best for oftentimes the whole,
yes,
and not necessarily what's best for Debbie, right, or what's best for Mark, yeah. But looking at the greater good of what's going to happen, even if it's a little uncomfortable for me. Right. At the time.
Yeah. But I love that little proviso you just tacked on at the end there, because I think that's the key to health in it, isn't it? That there are times where it's got to be uncomfortable for you or for me for us to achieve what's best for the whole. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do welcome, and it's one thing I have found, I didn't really talk about city council, but, there are always dissenting views. Yes. I get a lot of emails of people, with varying opinions about different topics. And I really appreciate hearing from people that don't necessarily think like I do.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So
So yeah, that's another part of your story we didn't touch into. You're on city council now. What made you decide to run?
A former student called me.
Okay.
And said, Dr. Connor, have you thought about running for elected office? And I was like, no. And he was like, we really do need more women to step up and serve our community. And I was like, I don't know. I have to think about that. And went home and had a conversation. And I was like, well, let me explore this. I did a lot of homework before I made the decision. I met with every member of the council, talked to them about the dynamic of the council, how much time they spend each week. So I did quite a bit of research before I decided, I think this would be a great thing to do. And there are a lot of things in our community that I think it's a critical time right now for the city of Myrtle Beach in our growth and development. And I'm excited to be part of the process.
That's cool. I love it. Yeah, there's some really good stuff happening.
Yeah.
And there needed to be a lot of really good stuff happening from the relatively recent past. But
Absolutely.
It's great to have people like you who are right in the thick of it there.
Well, thank you.
Making a difference.
Good or bad?
Well, yeah, no, I'd say that, well, from what you've just said, I'd say it's got to be good because you're drawing in different views, different strengths.
Yeah.
I think all of us who live in the area are very aware that there's a lot of different personalities on city council.
Yeah.
And,
great,
and
though.
I think,
everybody's great.
Right.
I really enjoy everybody on council.
That's cool. And I think that in itself is a great picture of what we aim for with this podcast is to help people who are very different to turn their differences into strengths.
Yes.
And that's why I wanted to get you on, because I've seen you do that in several different settings now and see how good you are at it. So,
Thanks.
but when you find someone's strengths, or when you think you've spotted a strength in someone, what do you do to help them to engage that strength with the needs of the whole?
Really looking for opportunities to plug them in.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And sometimes, I mean, it depends. Like if it's someone within my office, it might be plugging them into a committee or something where I think that they could flourish and learn. Sometimes those opportunities aren't available in the workspace. So maybe making a recommendation that they volunteer for a certain organization or they get involved in a different organization outside of the workplace in order to develop that strength and their interest, which I think is very important.
That's cool. And having the ability to see that in other people, it sounds to me like that's a key part of your success, both in education and in the city, that you can see those kinds of things. And I appreciate that about you. I guess that's how I ended up working with you in the first place, because you're like, hey, you come over here and help us.
I can recruit people.
You certainly can recruit people. It's wonderful. And what I wonder is, when you look, because we're a fairly diverse community here in Erie County and in Myrtle Beach, are there differences in the way you have to approach folks from different cultural backgrounds or different, maybe they're imports like I am, maybe they're locals. How do you approach navigating some of those differences? Because different people respond differently to different approaches, I'm guessing.
Well, that's true, but I would say I'm consistent.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping you'd
I'm
say.
consistent. I think consistency, no matter who you're working with, that's one thing about good leaders, right? Is being steady.
Very good.
Being predictable. Yes. And so I am thoughtful in listening. I take time to process, right? So I don't react immediately to people often. Sometimes that's really hard, but, and also understanding we've got to, understand that people's ideas and thoughts are going to be different from ours. Right. But I think that doesn't change who I am. And I have found that as long as I am honest about who I am and truthful about that, no matter who you are, you respond to that.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? So I'm not going to pretend to be one person to you and a different person to someone else.
Right.
Just because they're from a different place or because they have a different political leaning or whatever that is. I'm pretty down the middle, steady.
That's beautiful.
And that's my approach.
Right. Yeah.
Though I appreciate, the differences that people have.
Sure.
And that's critical in the work that we do. But it's also really important to be who you are.
Excellent. I love that. So you heard it here first, folks. The key to bridging differences is to be consistently authentic and to be open to what everybody brings and want them to play their part. I love that. That's cool. So you and your husband also have a pretty active social life and an involvement in the wider community. How do you navigate maybe I ask the question a different way. Are there differences between the way you have to operate in the workspace, in the education, higher education world versus the way you can meet with, friends at the tennis club or whatever? How do you navigate those shifts in the week? Does it feel different to you, or are you consistent and authentic right across the board and you're the same person all the way?
I'm consistent all across the board.
Yeah.
That saves a lot of trouble, that's right?
Cool. Yeah.
But, one thing with, we are really involved, right? Whether it's in volunteer or other activities that both of us have. And it's just prioritize, always getting into prioritizing what we're doing and doing things that are fulfilling, right. And whether... And that feeds, a lot of my friends are like, how are you not totally exhausted? How are you? And sometimes I am totally exhausted. But how do you just get up and you just keep going? And it's because I have things in my life that feed me. I'm doing things that fill me up to begin with. Right? So teaching fills me up. Being on city council fills me up. So I've filled my life with things that are more nourishing to me than things that deplete my energy.
Wonderful. Yeah. So that underscores, again, something that we come back to again and again on the podcast, is that self-awareness is the beginning of all of this success.
Absolutely.
Understanding yourself.
I teach a class specifically about assessing leadership skills, and I'm teaching a short 5-week course currently with a group of leaders in the community, and they are having to do self-assessments. And I'm teaching this class on Wednesday nights in person, and a lot of conversation around being mindful of and reflective of ourselves. And we often, because we're so busy, we don't take time for that reflection. And how that is so important, no matter what level of leadership, no matter what level of accomplishment we have, if we are not really being honest and reflective, whether it's through journaling or having good conversations with people we trust, we're not doing ourselves any favors.
That's cool. And I, from having known you for quite a while now, I've seen you do that in your own journey, to have that self-reflection and to have the courage to make adjustments when you see, I think I'm going to be more valuable, more fruitful, more fulfilled.
Yes.
If I go this way than if I stay on the track I'm on.
Yes.
You don't seem to be someone who treasures the rut they're in.
Yes. I'm not afraid for change. And changes can be very invigorating.
Right.
For us. So, but I have to say that the stepping up and running for a political office was the most anxious thing I've ever done. Like that was really, I wasn't expecting the anxiety of that whole process, right? Somebody said it's like running a marathon naked, I guess, that people are just going to try to pick you apart. And so it was a good activity for me to learn more about myself and how to respond to, really mean people that don't know you and how happy they are to make up stuff about you. And so it was a good learning. I had never really experienced that before.
Right.
And so I can understand why people wouldn't want to put themselves out there. But I'm confident enough and steady enough in who I am, and happen to know a lot of people that have known me a long time like you that understand I am pretty consistent in who I am, no surprises.
Absolutely. But I think it's fair to say that our political climate right now is very much focused on, lobbing bricks at the other side, and very divided. So and some of our listeners would be boggling at the fact that you say, yeah, I'm pretty steady and I know myself and it's fine, when people try and pick me apart on the Naked Marathon.
Yes.
So what hints could you give us for anybody who's not maybe as rooted in their self-awareness as you are? What advice could you give when somebody's facing maybe criticism or opposition? What would you say to somebody who's not sure how to handle that?
I think first, when you hear criticism, I think, one, you should maybe hear it.
Sure.
Right? You should listen, you should hear it and reflect on it, right? And then you have to decide what to do with it. Actively, you have to decide whether it is, maybe there's something to that. Maybe I spoke inappropriately with someone, or maybe you decide that's garbage, right?
Yeah.
Like that's an untruth and not fair and inappropriate. And then with that, you throw that in the garbage.
Right.
And you just move on. Right. And that, the first couple that came to me, I was like, how? I was very shocked. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not giving any energy to it.
Yes.
Right. So I had to, with each incident, and there were several, I'm like, yeah, I'm not giving any energy to that. And moving in, knowing, just kind of affirming myself of, that's not who I am.
Right. So for all of our listeners, there's going to be several points of the journey you just described that are going to be a challenge for them.
Oh, yeah.
Probably throwing the garbage in the garbage and leaving it there will be the first one that they'd have to learn to get stronger in.
Yes.
But I think secondly, the learning to listen to it first before throwing it out is another really powerful piece of wisdom for us all.
And that's a reflection piece.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't hurt.
No. And it may be that there's 10% of what's been lobbed at you that has
less,
or even less. Yeah. Okay. I was trying to be, worst case
scenario. Even if it's 10%, right? That you take it and evaluate it for what it is.
Right. And then you drop the 90% of malice in the bin.
Yes.
and
keep
walk
the
away. 10% you can learn from.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I love that. Excellent. You also mentioned at the beginning that you're a proud wife and mom and grandma.
Yes.
So tell us just a little bit, not personal details, but tell us a little bit of how do you express your consistency, your authenticity in the way you communicate with your family? Do you keep all of that other education and city council stuff out of the way to just be you with the family, or is there a blend, or how does it work?
All of those things are me.
Right.
Right. So there's no separating all the things.
Good.
And so whether it is council member Debbie, Professor Debbie, Administrator Debbie, organizational leader Debbie, whatever it is, Mom, I love it. My daughter now turns 30 in a couple of weeks, and she calls me sometimes, and she's like, I had to call on my inner Debbie. And so the first time she did that, I'm like, what does that mean exactly? You know, and she's like, I just expressed myself clearly in a meeting,
Right.
that I didn't agree, and I expressed why, and people respected that. And I was like, good for you. So,
Yes.
still with an adult child, the lessons continue both ways, right?
Sure.
She teaches me a lot as well, and so that's fun. And my husband is the calming entity in our world. I am, you know, blah, 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 and he does a lot, and he's an amazing leader. Probably one of the most humble leaders is his example to me, and he's just a very calming influence with me, in our family, and with the people that he works with.
Right.
And so I think that I'm very lucky that my immediate family feeds me as well.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I also have my mother here. She moved to Myrtle Beach about 3.5 years ago, and I find myself in a more caregiving role now with her as she battles cancer. And that also gives me great opportunity to learn from her. I see her almost every day. If I'm not seeing her face to face, I talk to her on the phone several times a day, but I'm still learning from my own mother,
Right. That's
which
so
is
beautiful.
special to me.
Yes. So somebody who's constantly involved in educating others is also constantly learning.
Oh,
And that is a
absolutely.
beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yes.
And I guess that's a good place to wrap it up. But Debbie, you've been so helpful to all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks
And
for
thank
having
you for
me.
all you do here in the community. It's
Thanks.
wonderful. We're glad to have you with us.
I'm
Maybe we should
having
get
fun.
Tracy on sometime and see.
You should. He probably would avoid this
Maybe
at
so.
all costs.
Maybe so. Maybe
Yes.
we'll just be kind to him and leave him out.
He would avoid it. Yeah, he would appreciate being left out.
Right. Well, thank you so much,
Thanks.
Debbie. And that's it for this week. We'll see you again next week.